My name's Deborah Gray, and with me today is Jennie Owens. Jennie's writing a book to help parents who are raising children when the children have had earlier maltreatment or some kind of developmental challenge early in life. So Jennie is a parent of children who have had such challenges. And so we'll be talking in this videotape about self-care. She'll be interviewing me, I'll be interviewing her. So hopefully this interview will be helpful for people who are listening in. So thanks so much for doing this, Jennie.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor. I very highly respect you. So.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. So
should I start in on my
please
questions?
do.
Awesome.
Please do.
I guess one of the first questions I wanted to talk about, because obviously the focus of my book is on the parents. There doesn't seem to be a lot out there on how the parents can kind of deal with all the things that they're going through. What are the challenges or the struggles that you primarily see these parents going through?
Well, I think one of the first challenges is that there's such a variety of circumstances that kids have come through that when you're adopting or fostering, you don't know what your particular child's road will be. You don't know whether you're going to have a child with lots of challenges or few. And so it's hard to get your expectations ready.
Yeah.
And then after you do understand what type of situation you're in, sometimes you find that you have to correct course partway through. And when you're correcting course, already by the time you've decided to correct course, you find that you're on the wrong course, or you have to alter course abruptly, and it's going to take time, energy, and resources and information. So it's a little bit like trying to do an engine job on yourself, if you consider yourself a vehicle, while you're still in motion. You know, you've got to keep the wheels on the road, you have to keep all the balls in the air. The family structure has to continue, but you might find that you have to investigate issues from educational issues to behavioral issues. You have to find out something about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder in some cases. And so there are just lots of areas that require attention. One of the other issues is that parents often expect to be able to use the type of parenting that they had themselves. If they were privileged enough to grow up in a more or less typical family, whatever that is, but most people have more good things than bad things to say about their growing up years. Not everybody, but they think, well, keep the good and that my parents did, but I'll alter the things that I don't think work so well. But they don't have to start with a whole new specialized parenting program. And for many of the parents, they find that they have to use a specialized parenting program that is very different than the way they were parented or expected to parent, and it may not lead to their strengths. So they'll have to come up with a whole new parenting scheme. They'll have to come up with new strengths, and they may be strengths that they'll need to develop for a period of time. So it can be complicated. What were some of your experiences coming through the parenting journey?
I think a lot of it was just, you know, as you learn different traumas that the child had been through and knowing, okay, so now what? You know, so you're kind of trying to figure it out as you go along. And then just even personal challenges for me where, you know, I'm dealing with a lot of behaviors that were difficult and challenging, and then trying to stay healthy, emotionally healthy myself while I was dealing with those behaviors was sometimes really tough for me. So I dealt with a lot of emotional challenges.
Did you get the feeling that you were doing something wrong all the time?
Yeah, you know, especially my children with what they dealt with, there was constantly kind of an attention seeking, and so it was never enough. There was never enough attention. And so for the longest time I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep giving and giving and giving. And you know, it didn't work that way. And all of a sudden I went, okay, this isn't working because I'm not doing well here. And, but there was just always that message of, you're not doing enough, because we want more.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of the parents, they're golden retrievers.
Mm-hmm.
How can I please you? Shall I do more? Oh, that wasn't enough. Let me do more.
Well, I think I thought, okay, you know, they have all these early things that they've missed out on. If I give enough, then at some point they're going to heal and everything's going to be fine. And it didn't dawn on me that, you know, setting boundaries and stuff was really helpful for them. So, yeah.
And also for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for a lot of the kids, when they're expressing a certain need or a certain sentiment, we take that very personally. And instead of realizing, oh, that's a symptom of what they've been through, and it will take years.
Yeah.
And it really, I need to listen to what they're saying, but I also have to balance it with, could anybody feel this need by doing more?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Or do I need to hold back enough so that I can still take care of myself, have friends, have some kind of a decent work or, you know, sleep schedule?
Yeah. Sleep.
You laughed with sleep. What were you thinking?
Oh, well, I just know a lot of the parents, you know, kids will have nightmares at night or things like that, and so a lot of the parents, you know, deal with sleep. For me, I dealt with sleep issues just because of the stress, that I was so stressed that it was hard to sleep at night. I didn't wake feeling rested. So.
Well, I think that brings up a really interesting question is, how do you keep your own internal balance when you're parenting or spending ample times with kids who are unbalanced? Because our basic balance is governed by hormonal levels, something called neuroendocrine levels, which are our brain and hormone levels.
Okay.
And those levels are pretty steady if we've achieved a level of balance earlier in our lives. You know, we've had proper nurturance, we have had traumas that have been treated or dealt with, you know, if we've had traumas, and or maybe we haven't had traumas at all, or terrible griefs, you know, and so we're pretty even. But when you're bonding to somebody, then you open up your heart and mind to the feelings and emotional states of another. And the kids don't have even brain and hormone patterns, what we call neuroendocrine patterns. Instead, they're traumatized, and so they'll have very spiky moods, uneven sleep schedules, PTSD symptoms. And then those kids really, who are having such a hard time, legitimately come to us. It's like, help me with this. But instead of getting stability from us, sometimes we open ourselves up to getting very unstable with them. And so we have to really watch that we keep ourselves stable so that they can gradually attach to us and then begin to download better, stable brain patterns from us.
Now, so that brings up a question. So if a parent's in your office and they're wondering, like, how do I do that? You know, here's this kid, they're all over the map. How do I stay stable while they're all over?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things you can do is think, were you ever really stable in your life? And some parents have never really been that stable. And so they need to work through some things in their lives so that they can process old grief or trauma and steady on. Or some parents have had ongoing depression, and then they're trying to parent a child in a depressed state. And kids don't react well to parental depression. You know, so they might have to get some specialized care. However, the majority of people going into adoption are stable before they ever got to the adoption. And so they need to be able to get back to that stability. One of the things they need to do is ruthlessly pare back a lot of expectations in life. So many of us are doing volunteer work. We have expectations about a pretty complex household.
Yeah.
And when I say a complex household, might be the amount of cleanliness in the household, how much gardening or baking or cooking or entertaining we do. And some of that just won't be done for a while in the same way. We need to pare down and simplify.
Okay.
One woman who had goats told me, I think this is going to be a 3-goat kid, meaning she was going to have to get rid of 3 goats in order to take care of this kid.
That's
you
awesome.
know, it's a picture of what she was doing in her life.
Yeah.
But you know, many times we're involved with volunteer work or other good things, and those things need to really just wait for several years till we reestablish a household pattern that makes sense. And so that kind of ruthless appraisal of what it will take that we excise so that we're left with a manageable schedule that will allow for some real reparenting that will take time and attention. You know, and so some of the kids are going to take a lot of time and attention. We pare back, as I've mentioned before. Another thing that we look at are what things are leaching energy from the family that really can be done in a different way. So it's fine if you want to have piano lessons for your kids, but if the piano lessons are causing a big fight, you know, do you really need to have those piano lessons for the child? Or do you have to drive in the car to get them? You know, could you do things in a little different way if they're causing fights? Another thing that I look at is, are you so in the hole to yourself that you need to take a break? And if so, I really like people to take 3 hours 4 times a week for a month, or 4 hours 3 times a week, and just have some rest put in so you can take time off. Does the couple need to do something just for the couple where they don't even talk about kids? And then that couple just has a night off once a week where all they do is something pleasurable with each other. Those are just some simple ideas that we could use.
Okay. What do you say to that parent who's already like in the hole, you know, like you said, they've already kind of, maybe they didn't know all the issues that this child was going to have when they got into it, or maybe they just have gotten to a point where they didn't even realize how bad it was. But what would you say? You said rest. Are there certain ways that you recommend that they get those rests? Like, what if they're the people that say, we don't have someone to watch the children, or...
Well, you do it as an emergency precaution sometimes. What will happen if I keep on this course? And so some people are looking for a crisis to reset them. And so, not in a conscious way, but just below the conscious level, they're like, I'll just keep going this way and I'll run the car off the road here. And then somebody else will have to fix it. And so you're like, well, will a crisis really be in anybody's best interest?
Yeah.
You know, loss of a job because you simply don't get there rested enough to be effective. Loss of your health. You know, a CPS complaint that's founded because you got so frustrated you hit somebody. You know, do you really want to make decisions on the basis of a crisis, or can you think of something else? So I was thinking of one mother I had this conversation with, and it turned out that she was a single parent in her early 50s. She had well over $500,000 in her retirement account, and she could work part-time and still make ends meet. So why not do that? You know, or sometimes I find that parents have gotten just very rigid about what they want from other people. And they have to be a little more flexible. It's like, yes, your helpers will do things in a different way than you do things, but they're not you. And if you want help, sometimes your helpers will do things the way they want things done. So accept help. It would be more important to accept help than be the controlling boss of the world and end up in this lonely situation that you're in right now.
Because a lot of, that's one of the arguments that I hear from parents who are in this situation is, well, you know, if I send them to respite, they get away with things. And so, or even, you know, the parent that says, well, I get payback when I come back from the kids, it's not even worth it to go. So what would you say to those parents?
That sometimes their mental health is more important than controlling every aspect. So I send kids out with an expectation. The respite worker will allow you to do things that mom and dad don't. Go. Have a wonderful time. It's a little bit of a break from you, and it's a little bit of a break for your parents. And we're perfectly okay about that. But I often find that parents start getting very controlling as they feel more chaotic.
Yeah.
And it's a symptom of a larger problem.
Yeah.
That in their control, they're cutting themselves off from very realistic solutions.
Okay. What would you say to that mom that, like, because a lot of the kids do payback worse. So, like, for me, example, there was a time when if I went out for 2 hours, I paid for 2 weeks. And so at a certain point, you kind of went, gosh, I'm more tired now than I was when I left. So what would you say to that parent?
Well, a lot of the kids have abandonment issues, so they're afraid of losing their parent. And so when the parent goes, they try to express, don't do that anymore. That scared me very much. So in the same way we're videotaping this interview, I would videotape something. You know, you can use your camera and or your phone and videotape a little bit on, I love you very much, but to be a really happy mom, I need some time to just go away and relax a bit. But I promise you I'll come back.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And I'll leave something of mine with you to guarantee I'll come back.
Okay.
Don't make it something really precious, because if they're mad at you, they'll tear it up. But by the time you go through this routine a few times, it'll work. And then before you go, practice what it's going to be like when you come back. And so when I come back, I want you to have something that you share with me, and I'll have something that I share with you.
Oh, that's really neat.
And something you can do also is, I wouldn't do this for a 2-hour break, but probably save it up for a little longer break. But say, after I leave, I'll have something hidden under your pillow for you. You have to change it when you go out.
Yeah.
And that way, even though I'm gone, you'll know I'm thinking of you.
Oh, that's really
Okay,
neat.
so go look under your pillow and see if there's something there that I've saved back for you.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and that lets you know that you're in my heart and mind, even though I'm not here.
Yeah.
And leave a picture of you with the child.
Okay.
Okay, but they haven't achieved what professionals call object constancy. All that means is the mom inside. One of the things that little kids figure out is that mom comes back and you don't have to be afraid, because you can kind of store a memory of mom and you have mom inside.
Yeah.
She'll come back. You can think about her and remember her, and it's not too long and she'll be back. But all they can think of is, I've lost moms before, or I had rotating orphanage workers, and like the one I really liked, the one who cared about me, you know, she'd go and then I'd be unsafe and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I don't want mom to do that anymore, so I'll give her a really hard time and teach her not to do that. So
They train us well sometimes, don't they?
and so there gets to be this despair, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
So you want to make it just an expected part of, that's what moms have to do. They have to spend time with their friends, or they have to go exercise, or they have to go buy groceries by themselves, you know, without little kids running around. And that's how they come back in the good mood. Okay, or they have to go date their spouse, otherwise they don't have the romantic feeling. They're grouchy with each other. So you talk to them about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Those are great ideas.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Because it is. That's one of the challenges.
Sure. Do you want to refer to questions, or are they just coming in your mind? Feel free.
Well, I guess, what are some of the changes, like if you see those parents, because one of the things is just really convincing parents that they need to practice good self-care. So what are some things that you see, like maybe some positive changes when people start going, hey, I really do need to take good care of myself? What are some of the differences that you see in the people that aren't taking care of themselves and the people that are?
And of course, in answer to your question, people really vary in the difficulty of a child coming into their home. So
Yeah.
some parents need to do little self-care. Some parents have to practice it in a very religious, structured way. So there's a variety, but one of the things that you can notice is that if you have a parent who works outside of the home, the parent who isn't getting good care is like, lucky you get to go to work. And they actually envy the person who is leaving the home. That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Another thing is they become kind of jealous of who isn't taking care of the children at the time. And so they think instead of, oh great, I get to come home to my kids, it's onerous. Your turn. I've been with the kids all day. Your turn. And kind of resentful. There gets to be this comparing of who's entitled.
Yeah.
Comparison of suffering.
Okay.
There's a sense of isolation, like nobody really understands. I've been there for my friends, but nobody's here for me. I'm alone in it. And I really wish I could come down with some kind of grave illness that would require me to lie in bed and have people take care of me. That's a common sign of danger. When you don't want to die, you just want to lie there and not have to do anything for a while and be taken care of. And so you've got this sense of this person running out of gas. But actually, in a more dangerous way, you find that maybe you're yelling at children and you haven't been a yeller. And you can't seem to stop yourself, or you find yourself hitting at your kids, or blaming them for your own bad moods, or not sleeping well, not eating well, either gaining or losing a lot of weight, looking on the dark side of just about everything, and feeling like you've ruined your life. I had one man said, I think God was laughing at me when I felt him call me to adopt this child. God tricked me. And those are not typical thoughts that people have. They just feel like they pulled the short end of the stick in life.
So that's a really good indication that they've gone too long without taking good care of themselves, is that?
Absolutely. And, or else maybe they had a sentiment like this all along, that they looked at the glass as constantly half empty. And this has just brought it down into the really serious realm.
Yeah. Okay.
So, when I see people taking care of themselves, they tend to say, if they have children with many more difficulties or challenges, they say, yes, my kids are difficult, but I wouldn't trade them for the world.
Okay.
Or I really have to take care of myself so that I'm able to give my best to my children. Or I love my family. Or I've learned so much from this experience. Or, I have a sense of empathy for my child and for me going through this. Or I found a supportive group of friends. They really understand and care about me. Or maybe I can't go on the vacations I did before, but we found other ways to have fun.
Okay.
Or I become a deeper person.
So it's like they're acknowledging the challenges, but they're also acknowledging the positives of the situation as well.
Absolutely, and they're seeing that they're making a difference. And they have some hobbies or activities that have nothing to do with the child, that are simple pleasures for themselves. They know how to value their time, and they use it wisely.
Okay. What would you say to that parent who's gotten to the point of the glass is half empty and things are feeling really dark at this point for them?
Probably that other people have been in their shoes and done some things to help themselves, and that they can too. It's not hopeless, but they're going to have to do some things that really are acknowledgments that they can't do this by themselves. And look at it the other way.
Yeah.
Can you really say that people can give kids horrible nutrition, expose them prenatally to toxins, traumatize them, or move them many, many times, and that it's going to take just one parent team to somehow take care of them? Hardly.
Yeah.
It's going to take a real team. The more problems you have, the more assistance you'll need as a family, and not everyone is going to be approaching this child in the same way.
Yeah.
So, kind of back to your question, you give up being grandiose, and you humbly say, if I'm going to get through this, I'm going to need a community and help around me. And I'll have to consider doing things in a little different way than I had thought.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. You've kind of touched a little bit on this, but I kind of was hoping you would kind of give a list or whatever of some of the self-care strategies that you really recommend, especially for the parents who have more difficult or more traumatized children.
Sure, pick out a support group that is a support group that actually has some mutual support in it. Some of the support groups have gone on too long. Everybody whose kids got better left, and all the people whose kids remained children with multiple problems are left. So find out the buzz on a particular support group. Is it a healthy one?
Okay.
Are the members mutually supportive? Do they have hope? Do they have mutual resources? That would be one thing.
Okay.
Another thing is find out what resources are in your community for mental health needs, special education needs, any kind of assistance for respite. For developmental disabilities might be things that I would look at. Many times you have to look at specific areas where they have assistance for children.
Okay.
And so some parents hunker down and they don't realize that maybe the community mental health center up the street has some great social skills help for your child. Or developmental disabilities give so many hours of trained respite care for your children every year. So you have to look into some specialized assistance for your kids. And so this means being able to have maybe 3-4 hours a week that you spend on the computer or making phone calls. And if you can team up with other people so that you can divide the wealth and then share the wealth, it really works a whole lot better. I find that some parents do well to actually trade kids.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's like, well, so-and-so is jumping on my last nerve this week. Do you have one that isn't getting to me in quite the same way? Why don't you take my child and I'll take yours, and we'll flip-flop for the day.
Well, that's great, because sometimes they're better for other people.
They are better for other people. I find that some parents are staying home a little bit too much. When if you could take your kids to the park where you could supervise, in kind of a general way, then the kids could run around and let off some steam, especially if you're taking them to a park that's not a busy one. And you could sit on the sidelines a little bit and not have to work so hard, and maybe meet another parent with similar challenges, and the two of you could spend some time together. I used to have a couple kids who would tantrum every afternoon, somewhere between 3:30 and 4:30. And so the mom would just throw their bikes in the car they still had training wheels. Take them to Marymore that had bike trails.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd ride their bikes on the trail, and she found that worked off some of their steam. They got some exercise, and then they come back home again. So replace something that is a pattern where they're blowing off steam in a tantrum or something with something that would exclude that.
Okay.
And that works for some kids. I mentioned the 3-4-12 rule. 3 hours 4 times a week, or 4 hours 3 times a week for time off, get respite there. Do that 3 to 4 weeks. Often we've got so much in our brain that is unprocessed that gives us a little time to calm down and put things away. A lot of parents have stopped an exercise routine, and they need one to reduce stress. And so you can look for a gym that has some kind of daycare situation with it, and that will work for some of the kids. Some parents have multiple children and the daycare won't take care of it, but if you have an older child who can safely be left in the car with some work, you can often leave one of the kids in the car and then one of the kids in the gym at daycare, even if the two of them mix it up, in the daycare together, and you can get a workout in. Those are some things that will work. Also, you can circulate on bulletin boards that your kids would be kids that a family could have a service project done through. Okay, so some of the private and public schools will have service projects. I've had some of the schools do very nicely with sending in a kid to work on coaching on social skills with your kids.
Oh, wow.
And so you can have this person come in and coach your kids on social skills as a social as a service project to get those hours in, while you sit back and do something like, balance your checkbook for the first time in 3 months or something like that.
That's great.
What are some strategies you've used, Jenny?
Well, by the time I learned about this whole self-care thing, because I just kind of jumped in full force and really stopped. I did the whole stopping, taking breaks and stuff because of the payback, and I got to the point where my body was pretty bad off. I mean, stress had really kind of taken a big toll, and so one of the things that I really did, I found a really good doctor, and a lot of vitamins and supplements, because even, how magnesium is used up more in your body when you're under stress, or vitamin C or B vitamins. And so she was able to kind of give me a good balance of those supplements to help my body. We've addressed adrenal fatigue because I had gotten to that point, and some things like that. And I think just even understanding what was going on was a really huge thing, because for a while I thought, I'm just a bad mom because, I don't even want to get off the couch, and I used to do all this fun stuff with my kids, and, and I would take bike rides and we'd do all that fun stuff, and now, I can barely lift my head up. And so for me, the primary start was really looking at the medical stuff, and it was like, oh, okay, there's a reason that I feel so tired. So yeah, a lot of it was just addressing those kinds of issues.
That's great.
Yeah.
When we have kids who are running high cortisol is the hormone that we're using to try to dampen stress. Anyway, when we have kids with high cortisol, they don't want to go to bed at night, they're lethargic in the morning, and it makes it difficult to get to bed ourselves at night. And they wake up more easily sometimes because of nightmares and so forth.
Yeah.
Anyway, to point, what I find is that our research shows that parents' cortisol begins to go up. But the Oregon Social Learning Project looked at cortisol levels in parents, and they found that they could correlate high cortisol in parents with behavior problems in children.
Wow.
We can also correlate it with cortisol levels children's cortisol levels in behavior problems are also correlated. But if we just take the parent and manage to bring their cortisol levels down, even if we do nothing with the child, their cortisol becomes lowered and their behavior problems come lower.
Oh, wow.
And it's interesting because when we're calmer, the kids can use us as a basis for regulation. So if we take care of ourselves, it helps the kids to come down. Now it's not, it doesn't completely cause kids to calm.
Yeah.
Of course, if they've been traumatized, you'll still see the heightened cortisol or inverse cortisol level,
Yeah.
but it helps over time.
Okay.
And if we can keep a strategy going so that we're welcoming the child, we're happy to be with them, we feel more playful, we actually spend time playing, and we find that the kids don't feel so much shame about their own being, their own behavior.
Yeah.
Like, look what I'm doing to my parent. Instead they feel like, oh, I must be an okay kid because I'm making my mom smile. I can make my mom happy.
Yeah.
I couldn't be that bad. She enjoys spending time with me.
Yeah.
It's a very different message, and I don't think people think really carefully what it's like when when children see their parents in a bad way. They're not thinking good things about themselves.
And I think that's a big thing because when you're, I totally lost track of my thought. You were talking about, people don't understand, like, if I don't take breaks, because an exhausted parent to a child looks like someone that's mad at them, and they automatically assume, because that's kind of where they're at developmentally, oh, I must be doing something wrong. And so people don't understand that they're undoing a lot of the therapeutic parenting that they're trying to do when they don't take good care of themselves. So, yeah.
I have a lot of just mini suggestions that I use for self-care. One thing is to come up with 50 positive things you'll do for yourself in a week's time.
Okay.
It's a to-do list, and you have to have 50 marks
Okay.
that you've marked off, that I've done 50 things that are positive in my own life in a week's time. I mean, some of those things are things that are positive disciplines. Like, as you think about your spirituality, did you spend any time really nurturing spirituality? Or exercise? Did I exercise? Did I take time to make and eat good meals? Things like that. But some of the things are just for fun. Like, maybe if you like seeing movies, did you see a movie? Did you spend time and do that? Did you put flowers on your table?
Yeah, something very small can make a big difference.
It really can,
Yeah.
or and you can do things like that for your spouse too. My husband likes dots, and every once in a while I put a package of dots on his dresser.
Oh.
It's a small thing, but it just brightens his day a little bit. But what you're starting to signal to yourself is that you have resources for yourself, your resources for your family. And the most important strategy for self-care is have a strategy and stick to it. Work within margins of time and energy. Don't give your time and energy away. Always keep a little extra because you might need it. Don't give it away. When people say, do you have some extra time? Always give them a 24-hour answer. Okay? Because if you think, I have a little time for that, later you'll go away and think, what was I thinking? I couldn't possibly take that on. So go home and at least think of talking to the home people. Could I take that on? And when they start to laugh and say, are you out of your mind? A lot of times you won't even open your mouth. Or if you have blurted out that you could do that, then quickly call and say, please, I miscommunicated. I did not think about that. Would you let me out of that commitment? I don't know why I thought I could say yes, because I surely can't.
Yeah.
But these are just, some things that you can think of. Oh, pajama days, that's something on my list. Sometimes families just need a break.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have family members who are having a hard time with routine,
Mm-hmm.
and anxious kids, and all our kids with trauma are anxious kids.
Yeah.
They really have a hard time with routines.
Uh-huh.
If you can take a day out of routine, it just really works.
Hmm.
You can put down what the day schedule is, but it might be sleep in. Number 2, nobody has to get dressed. Number 3, breakfast. Cold cereal of any type, your choice. Or peanut butter sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Playing in our pajamas.
Oh, that's
You know,
awesome.
And all day, you just do that day. You don't get dressed because you don't want to have to get out anywhere.
Yeah.
You have pizza, if you can afford it, delivered.
Uh-huh.
If you can't, you can buy those. Do you ever buy those little biscuits that come out of a
yeah.
tin and you whop them and they,
Yeah.
come out and you just put them on the tin? Well, you can make little pizzas with spaghetti sauce
yeah.
and those biscuits, and maybe put a pepperoni or 2 on, or just cheese. You can make those for pizzas for dinner. They're cheap.
Yeah.
They're fun,
Uh-huh.
But you take the day and just take a day off from routine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And stop pushing everybody so much.
Yeah.
Then a lot of parents are also thinking, oh my goodness, my kid's so far behind. You have to push, and catch up.
Yeah.
But instead, if you think, yes, my child is behind, but that doesn't have to ruin my life.
Yeah.
We're just going to finish parenting several years later than other parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to find helpers along the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Not everything is a race. I do have some parents who are not taking days off work when they could.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask, have you used all your personal days? No. I said, well, instead of going to work tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you get up, do your morning routine,
Mm-hmm.
and then leave for the day and do something really pleasurable. And then come back at the regular time. Use a personal work day.
Mm-hmm.
And go out and be in nature. Do a day hike.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that once a week till your personal days are used up.
Yeah.
Because the first thing they think of is, oh, I'm in debt to myself, but I really should be home with my kids, even though I don't want to be,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm burned out. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll go to work and be burned out that way. And when you get burned out, you can't think of solutions.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so you have to actually have somebody say, no, just you don't go to work, hike for the day,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back and you can do the evening routine.
Mm-hmm.
But do that once a week and, see if you can reestablish some sense of joy and delight in who you are, who your family is, or make sense of maybe what God's doing in your life.
Yeah, that's very true. And that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what kind of emotions do you see these parents dealing with? Because that's something that a lot of times they don't have time to process, that those breaks are really good for going, what am I even feeling and what's going on, and what is this telling me about myself? So what are some of the emotions that you see people dealing with?
Well, a lot of times people get so full of unprocessed thoughts
Mm-hmm.
that they stop processing daily life very well. They start forgetting things.
Uh-huh.
I mean, fairly significant things.
Yeah.
Like to deposit their paycheck if it's not on automatic deposit, to pay significant bills, to do their taxes in a timely way. So we got a pile up of problems. And they're so crisis driven, it's like that's tomorrow's problem. IRS didn't call today.
Yeah.
That's a concerning sign.
Mm-hmm.
Or they take on new problems because they'd rather have a new problem than an old problem.
Mhm.
So they'll actually decide to think of adopting another child, or taking on another challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a concerning sign. It's a sign of burnout. Or how parents who just, as I mentioned before, they get depressed. They get low mood and nothing will help anyway. So I'll just dreary on life's sad path, and hopefully I'll die young of something not too painful. You know, it's a wearying, unending plane.
Yeah.
And instead of realizing, oh, I have depression, and I need to do something about that medically and maybe with service of my own. For many parents, the whole meaning of life has changed because when trauma hits you, you can't process it smoothly until you sit in quiet time for most of us and figure it out.
Yeah.
What's it mean? What's it mean to my where I am in my life cycle, the meaning of who I am, my community. And so until you process it, it just stays in active memory and you think about it all the time and just feel very confused. And so those are people who just kind of walk around looking dazed. They can't seem to come up with a particular approach to how to solve the problem because they don't know which end of the problem to grasp. And so you need to have some quiet time to think things through.
Do you ever come across parents that are feeling guilty, like if they have a challenging child that's really driving them nuts at the point where they feel bad, like, oh man, I don't really like being around my kid right now, but I feel bad about that, and could you talk a little bit about like the conflicting emotions that sometimes they deal with?
Sure. Some parents meet their child and have anticipatory bonding, and they start bonding right away. And they, in this very intense way, just love that child. And the child might be driving them around the bend some days, but they love that child. But for a lot of other parents, when a child is challenging, they don't have this same sense of bonding or attachment to the child. Kind of feels like an irritating play date that's gone on way too long. It's time for this kid to go home.
That's funny. That's that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And they feel bad about it, but it just doesn't feel like they are that connected to that child, and yet everyone's like, oh, what a dear, and often the child is a child who's still doing mother shopping, going up to strangers and offering to sit on their lap, or they're shining and looking cute and wonderful for other people. They're like, what is wrong with me that I can't bond to this child? And everybody else seems to superficially like them. But when you have a child who's kind of pushing at you and doing like this, you know, come closer, stay away, or I like other mothers better than you. And you don't have that reservoir of all these positive memories or thoughts that you would have had that child been with you from the beginning. Then, you know, it's really hard to expect that of yourself. And so you can say, well, my child is a lovable child, but she's developed many rather irritating qualities, and I have to love her on purpose. But, you know, it's just I'm in this human body and I get a little irritated at times. It doesn't mean that I have to show it to her, but it's going to be a progression till we really come to love each other. You know, actually loving that authentic child will take a lot of time and intentionality for a lot of parents. And vice versa. Maybe you aren't what that child dreamed of. They just never really had a parent figure before, and you weren't what they had in mind. They just kind of thought it would be a particularly well-stocked orphanage, and you let them be in charge of it. And they find that you have a few expectations. You say no a good bit of the time. It's not what they had in mind.
That's awesome. I hear you. It sounds like you do a lot of reframing. Does that make sense? Like kind of taking a negative thought or emotion and kind of viewing it in a way that's a little bit different to kind of change your way of thinking about it. Does that make sense?
It does. Some people use that term reframing, but I think a lot of times we need to think what's normal in our situation.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be normal to expect a child who's never had a family before,
Mm-hmm.
who's always had a kind of push away or a series of abandonments, or maybe adults who loved and left?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be normal for that child to trust me and allow me to be in charge all the time? Or would it be normal for that child to do a lot of controlling of me and maybe mistrust me a good bit of the time until
Yeah.
they had ample experience with me?
Yeah.
Of course it would be normal for them to be controlling.
Yeah.
It's not like you want that to be the sustained behavior pattern, but
Yeah.
that is actually what would be normal. And so it's not something between you and this particular child for you to personalize, but it's a very common challenge for this type of life experience.
Yeah, oh, that's a great way to put it, because it is really easy for these parents to take it personally. You know, if a child's rejecting them or pushing them away, it's really normal to go, well, they don't like me.
Of course, of
So.
course. And that would be normal to think about that because
Mhm.
it's your relationship. But if you know that this is very typical for everybody in your situation, that's why it's nice to go to a conference like Refresh, where 1,000 people signed up, over 1,000 people signed up for the last conference, to just go be with other families who were walking the same journey. You know, it's a
Yeah.
good journey, but you can't use the same milestones as families who are on another type of a journey.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
That brought up another question that I had was, you know, sometimes it helps in dealing with those behaviors to understand the reasoning behind that behavior. If you have a parent that's really struggling to enjoy being around their child, or they're struggling with their own emotions toward that child, what are some things that you would explain to them about what's going on inside of that kid that would help them to deal with the behaviors better?
Well, I think that when you think of a child's heart, if you could imagine it as being kind of cracked down the middle from what they've been through, that cracked emotional heart doesn't hold very much love. And so you keep pouring in, but that child keeps re-experiencing emptiness.
Yeah.
And so when you are actually working in a healing way, working with trauma, working with griefs that they've experienced, gradually over time they'll be able to hold love more. And that's one of the concepts I would explain to parents.
Okay.
Another concept that I would explain to parents is that in those first few years of life, a lot of what you're developing is the emotional part of the child's brain, and an actual neurology or brain pattern of being settled. And so these are kids whose emotions aren't regulated or that is balanced. And so when they're angry, they become very angry. They're sad, extremely sad. When they're confused, they fall apart.
Yeah.
And so until they've spent ample time with an attached parent figure, they're not going to be settled. So they'll really have a significant amount of lack of emotional or even physical balance.
Yeah.
They're going to feel unsafe in the world. There isn't a sense of felt safety. So they'll want to be up at night and they'll want to be controlling a lot. And it's not like we want to help them stay that way. But you can't take a child whose brain has developed for being self-sufficient, mistrusting, and in the dog-eat-dog world, put them in a family and expect that they'll know what to do in a family.
That's a good point.
You know, they're going to have to re-experience many, many, many positive times before they begin to understand that they really are safe now.
Yeah.
And the vehicle for which we most effectively work in having kids re-experiencing a sense of felt safety, security, is in the attachment relationship where the parent's able to stay positive and secure most of the time. So that's what we'll work on, keeping the parents positive, safe feeling, nurturing, and then very structured, because the kids don't have very much impulse control for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll work on.
Okay. Those are great.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
One other question I had was about relationship, like the husband and wife relationship. Just, you know, there's a lot of difficulty sometimes in triangulation or different things. What are some of your recommendations for kind of keeping their marriage solid?
Well, one thing is to recognize that if your children have been in certain situations in which they've lost parent figures, or they've been abused by one gender or the other, that they might have one type of relationship with one parent and a completely different one with the other parent. And so the other parent who may be being treated in a more positive way might be, what's her problem? You know, I used to think I had a really nice wife, and, you know, she's something that rhymes with a witch, you know. She's not very nice anymore.
Yeah, she's not very fun to be around.
Right. You know, what's with her? And so I better side on the side of this poor child so she can think of the child in a more positive way. And that turns out rather badly, because then the child's like, oh good, I've set up a triangle. And so I don't have to really do what she says because Dad says something different. So, nanner, neener, neener, neener.
Yeah.
And then for kids who already have a hard time mistrusting, sometimes it's women or sometimes it's men, then this just plays into that. See, you don't trust them. They can't be trustworthy. Even mom or dad, whoever it is, doesn't trust her. And so you have to rework that. It's like, you know, I have confidence in this parent, that they are fair and that they love you. You know, so I would really like it if I could give you attention every time you get along with that opposite parent, instead of making a triangle where somebody's a rescuer and someone's a victim and someone's a victimizer. And a lot of kids have learned, because of abuse, to think in that triangle. You could say, in our family, everybody wins at the same time. There isn't a winner and a loser all the time. But many kids think in terms of winners, losers. You know, so you want them to think of, how does everybody win at the same time? So try to stay out of those triangles. Now, there sometimes are cases where one parent is clearly going over the edge and they're becoming abusive. This doesn't mean that you ignore that. You would immediately stop it and intervene if somebody's maltreating a child. You know, physically, emotionally, or otherwise. But in the majority of cases, you want to really side with each other. Make sure you spend some time maintaining a relationship with the other where you're not talking about what that child's progress or problems are. You're just doing some things just for the two of you that you enjoy. You know, even the garbage gets taken out once a week. And I think, you know, you need to date each other. Now, some people would rather just be at home if they have kids who go to bed and have people stop by, or, you know, they don't feel like they have to go somewhere. But spend some time just for each other. You know, if you have adults who have high stress, often we'll find that they're trying to catch up on the day's events at night. And after a while, they don't have a sex life. You know, make sure you have enough energy to have some sex life, you know, so that you can keep your couple relationship strong. We also find that sometimes you have one parent who's better at routine than the other, or better at the specialized parenting than the other. It can be a very disappointing situation to realize that one of the parents isn't so hot. And so I'll have some parents who keep trying to bring the other one up to speed. And I'm like, well, I hate to say it, but that other parent is really a slow boat, you know? But rather than assessing how good a parent are they, you can think, well, I radically accept that they aren't doing specialized parenting well.
Yeah.
What else could they do to help out,
Oh.
you know, in
Yeah.
the family? So I was talking to somebody not long ago who was bemoaning that her spouse didn't handle one of the kids very well. I says, well, how well does he cook? And does he clean up after dinner? Maybe he could do that, help out. You know, that would give you a break.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, well, maybe so. He actually does a pretty good job of that. He doesn't mind it. So sometimes you just have to rebalance the jobs in the family because the way you thought they would go, they don't go that way.
Okay.
And for the person who maybe doesn't do the specialized parenting well, don't be resentful and bitter about it. You know, it isn't realistic to expect that at every stage that you go through as a married couple, that the parent might particularly shine at every stage.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're great at the romance stage. They're great when the kids are a certain age. Maybe they stink during adolescence, or maybe they just do okay. Maybe they come on strong in adult years, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a lot of fun in your retirement years. But something that I think of sometimes is, you may not like the respite worker, but, you know, how's it going to go for you if you move on and get a divorce? You know, maybe the respite worker is going to be better than split custody. Or the particular person that your spouse might be dating next time around. You know, sometimes not taking care of your relationship has a really ugly consequence. And trying to single parent the kids by yourself, that's no cup of tea either. Respite on a regular basis, keeping your marriage strong, that could start to look pretty good.
Especially when you consider the alternative.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good.
But I think of marriage as a covenant, a promise.
Oh, yeah.
And so it has to be something pretty big before I'd upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
When you're going through a grief process and you're a little depressed, a lot of times there's a tendency to get really irritable, grouchy, and it's like, this person isn't helping me very much. I'd be better off without him. One less egg to fry. You know, one less load of laundry. What have they been doing for me lately? And when you start thinking like that, then you realize that you're just in the hole. You need to put in some more supports for yourself.
Yeah.
And take some of the pressures off.
Well, and it's such a good point, because so many parents get so focused on the kids, and they're putting all their time and energy into the kids, and the parents are floundering, you know, and their relationship is floundering, and they just, you know, but they're looking up new therapies, or they're trying to come up with new things to do for the kids, because it's kind of that putting out the fire. That's the crisis at the moment, is the behaviors. So I think that's really good advice.
Well, and there are so many times when the person we could control the most and do the most benefit for is ourselves. And so if we could just list 2 or 3 things about ourselves we'd like to change and put some energy into that, we would be better off than trying to manipulate a spouse to change. And it's like, well, how about our own selfishness, or our own lack of self-care, or our own lack of shopping for nutritious foods, or exercising, our own positivism. Are we really being as positive as we need to be? You know, are we doing all we can to really make changes in ourselves, or are we, you know, nagging at somebody?
Yeah.
And you know, just making an unpleasant home situation.
And I think sometimes it's so easy to get to that point, especially when you're struggling yourself. You just kind of, because we found that, you know, I didn't realize how depressed I was, or how far in the hole I was, and how I was interacting with my husband. So he was like, gosh, you're not very fun to be around. The kids are, but you're not. And, you know, we just kind of had this cycle that we all of a sudden had to go, wait a minute. And there was one day that I think I just called my husband, or I texted him and say, hey, I just want you to know how much I appreciate what you do for the family. And he told me when he got home, like, man, it made me excited to get home. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my goodness, I haven't been doing anything toward my relationship with him. I've been really just expecting him to give to me, and I haven't been giving back. I've been just, well, I'm giving to the kids, so you better give to me. So I think that is so important.
Yeah, it is. I had a couple that was really dealing with a very difficult situation. And they kept giving each other prompts as to what the other could be doing to help out the situation with one of their children. Anyway, neither of them did well with the prompts. And so there was this kind of grouchy irritability. I said, well, since the two of you don't listen to each other anyway, why continue it? How about for the next 2 weeks, you hold any of that aside, and the only thing you notice are the positives that the other does. And at the end of 2 weeks, the husband said, you know, for the first time in a couple of years, I kind of feel like my wife likes me. And she said, he does a lot that's really positive. I didn't realize until I noticed that. You know, and now sometimes the situation that we're in is we're so trying desperately to fix the problem that all we can think about is the problem. And that's part of the problem. So
Well, because even toward our kids, you know, we get focused on what we want to change. Because like you said, we are the only person we can change. And I found myself just kind of butting up against that, like, no, I want to change them. And when I finally went, okay, they're not going to change. I'm the only one I can change in this situation. That really kind of was my turnaround for that. So.
That's a very nice point. I like to keep the positives to negatives in a 7-to-1 ratio. And you'll often start feeling that pick up in yourself, because to get to the 7 positives, you have to start noticing positives. And when we're in an irritable, depressed, kind of traumatized state ourselves, we're looking for all the indices of the negative. And so we want to start looking at the positives and becoming lighter, more positive people. That will help us as well as helping the people around us.
Are there other perspective changes that you find kind of help? You know, some looking at the positives. Are there other things like maybe thinking patterns that can be changed from not so healthy to healthy that will help the situation?
Yes, fixed in a year is a big trap.
Okay.
So don't do fixed in a year. And then a lot of times we're making very negative attributions about our children. They're so this, they're so that, and so forth. And that's a thinking pattern I would really step back from. And instead, it's like, what are some things that I am hoping for my child? What are some areas of mastery I've seen lately? What are the precursors that will let me to be more optimistic in these areas or these areas? I go that direction more.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Well, it's been really a pleasure to have the interview here today.
Yes,
thank you so
thank you.
much for meeting with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Take good care.
Thanks.